I'd say probably my second favorite is Don Giovanni, which is a completely 180 degrees in the other direction, but it's also a great singing challenge and a great acting challenge. And Don Giovanni is really a lot of fun. I'm not doing much Mozart now. I'm doing the Magic Flute coming up at Opera Pacific pretty soon. I would love to do more Mozart, but I really feel like my voice is best suited to the bel canto repertoire, to Donizetti and Bellini and the early Verdi operas, and that as well as Strauss. I would really love to do more Strauss. I've done a little bit, but I really feel comfortable doing Strauss, Operatic Strauss. You know, I would love to do John the Baptist. It's a role that I've dreamed about my whole life, but I really don't think it's right for my voice. As I see it now, it takes I think it's really written best for a bass baritone, that's stronger on the bass end of bass baritone. It's not that high. It requires, the orchestration is rather thick, and it requires a really strong projection in the lower range. I would love to do it, but I don't think it's ideal. I'm thinking more the lines of Mandrika or Barak. I would love to do. I've sung Don Carlo, Posa and Don Carlo. I'd like to do more of those. I would love to do Jamon Traviata, and I'd love to do I Puritani. It's something I'd also love to do. Stanley Kowalski in Streetcar. I mean, I created that role. I've created five I think roles in new operas. And because of Streetcar Named Desire, I think I became known as the guy to go to for new operas, because I tend to get asked to do new works a lot, which is it's very flattering. It's very flattering. I think a little bit though that like I haven't done much Mozart recently, and I think it's partly because becoming known as the singer who does new operas, people it's hard for people to have the imagination to think that he can also do bel canto, and he can also do German repertoire, and this kind of some of the more standard things, because the people like to pigeonhole. They like to put people into a fach and say, oh, he's a such and such a voice, or she sings this, or she does that. It's just much more simple for them to deal with. So I have to fight that a little bit. Yeah. In Sophie's Choice. We did it first at Covent Garden in I can't remember what year, about 4.5 years ago, and it was done in Vienna in a German version that Angelika did there, but I didn't do it. And then the American premiere was just last year in Washington, and it was very successful. But I don't know how far it's going to go. It's one of those operas that is a little longer than it needs to be, and it's hard for a composer to decide what to take out. And we made quite a few cuts in Washington, and it helped it a lot. I think it's a very good piece. There is a new opera happening, The Fly, which was going to be done in Los Angeles here in the fall, and they had to change it to having a world premiere in Paris the following season, with a premiere in Los Angeles directly after that. And I can't do it. I'm already booked doing other things, so that one unfortunately is not in my plans now. There are a couple more that I've talked to composers about, but I don't have anything scheduled right at this moment. One opera that I created, Edward Gaines and Margaret Garner, with Denise Graves, right? The composer, Richard Danielpour, he told me, he said, I created this for Tom Hampson, but he didn't want to do it for whatever reason. And so, unfortunately, our voices are similar in what they can do, and so it was pretty appropriate for my voice. I know that Andre Previn wrote The Streetcar Named Desire with my voice in mind, and I just did a new opera called Everyman Jack, about the life of Jack London, which was written specifically for me, and I worked with the composer quite a bit when she was writing it. That was Libby Larson wrote that one. And so I think the smart composers will actually get together with the singers that they're going to have doing the roles and say, how is this? And because it's better for everyone if it actually fits the person better. I did the American premiere of The Tempest by Thomas Addis in Santa Fe last summer, And he didn't write it with my voice in mind. I don't think he wrote it with anyone's voice in mind. And what he wrote seemed to be impossible. Impossible. It was too high and too low, and the tessitura was sometimes for a tenor, sometimes for a bass. It was crazy. And in fact, many of the parts in that opera were written that way. The world premiere of Prospero, the role that I sang in London, was done by Simon Keenlyside. And he told me it was the hardest thing he'd ever done. And so when I accepted it for Santa Fe, I was thinking, am I crazy? Because I already know from the guy who did it the first time how hard it was. And it was absolutely horrendously difficult. Really, really difficult. But I did it. And Simon did it in London. And there was a part for Ariel, or coloratura soprano, done by Cynthia Seaton, that seemed to be absolutely impossible. And she did it. So my point is that sometimes composers write things for a voice they have in their mind. And even though it seems technically impossible, when you actually do it, you suddenly expand yourself. You expand to meet the challenge. You have to grow in technique, and you have to grow in determination and in patience and in perseverance, and you learn all of these very important tools in order to accomplish it. And once I finally did it, I thought, well, it really wasn't that bad. And that kind of experience makes you feel sort of like Superman. See there? Superman. One, just the S in the middle. When you really feel like you can do anything after that. And I often think to myself when I come across things that are really difficult, I think, well, it's not going to be more difficult than The Tempest was. So that's a great lesson, and I have to thank the composer. I was ready to strangle him when I first met him, but now in retrospect, I have to thank him for the challenge. The Tempest is a really wonderful work. It's very difficult for the orchestra, for the conductor, for everyone. It's very, very difficult. But the audience really loved it in both places, in London and in Santa Fe. So I think that if companies are brave enough to program it, that it might get done. It might get done again. And then again, who knows? Most modern operas are performed once or twice, and then they're forgotten. Yeah, I think it's important that I think it's very important that new opera is being written all the time. We can't just rely on the pieces of the past. And I think that, like Kurt Herbert Adler once said when he was leading the San Francisco Opera, he said, "I do one modern opera a year to lose money." And I think perhaps the best balance is to have the tried and true, very, very much loved works from the past as the bulk of the season, and then do a modern opera once, or maybe two operas a season that really challenge the audience, because it's definitely worth it. I think it's very important to keep the art form alive. Once in a while you come across something that's just a marvelous. I mean, when Billy Budd came out, it was a modern opera, very, very modern. It still strikes the ear as very modern in a lot of ways. And it's a real masterpiece. And you do come across masterpieces, even to this day, once in a while. And even those don't always get performed again, but it depends on a lot of different things.